Hello, my name is Steinway.
I'm a very famous piano, and here I am playing a concert.
Here I am in Paris, and here I am in Egypt. And here I am in the Swiss Alps. Here I am by a waterfall. I really get around all over the world. But my favorite venue is in Birmingham, Alabama, at Independent Presbyterian Church,
which is where there's going to be a concert featuring original compositions for piano trio. And I'll let my friend and the composer tell you more about it.
Hey, I'm Amy McClelland, or her avatar at least. I wanted to tell you about an upcoming concert that we'll be doing in Birmingham, Alabama, which will be for piano trio. The concert will be free and open to the public, and it will feature original compositions and a commissioned poem by an amazing poet, Eleanor Ann Walker. And we're hoping that you'll want to be a part of this project and help support modern-day musicians, composers, and poets with your financial assistance. So I'll be playing the piano part, and there'll be some amazing musicians from the Alabama Symphony Orchestra playing the violin and cello. Here are some excerpts from some recent concerts that we've given.
In addition to the original compositions, the concert will feature a beautiful piano trio by the Czech composer Antonín Dvořák.
But we were trying to find another piece or a set of pieces that would be lighter in nature. And I couldn't find anything that really seemed to fit. So I thought, hey, why don't I compose something? So the first set of pieces I composed, which hopefully will open the concert, are a set of 10 short pieces, and they're entitled Postcards. So just like a postcard, they're nice and short, about 1 to 3 minutes long. And each one is about a specific word that has to do with travel. Then we'll play the major work, and then we'll close with a set of pieces that are inspired by poems by famous poets. So the first postcard is a Latin word that describes the feeling that pushes someone to travel. This adjective describes a desire to change and alter one's life, behavior, or situation. And in the piece itself, you see this opening passage that really drives you and pushes you into the piece, propels you forward with these really fast harmonic changes.
So I was going to say that this is a computer program you're listening to, and it really sounds horrible. So if you can, imagine me, a Steinway with a beautiful sound, a Stradivarius, and, actual musicians who have dynamics and expression.
So the second postcard is or saudade. It's a Portuguese, Brazilian word that describes the nostalgia and love that remain after the journey ends. And it's a desire to return to a favorite place or a person that you met along the way. It's a yearning to be near to something or someone distant, and the feeling that remains after the trip ends. And impetus for the traveler to return to a favorite place, even with the knowledge that it may not be the same upon revisiting. So the third postcard, Resfeber, is a Swedish word which describes the restless race of the traveler's heart before the journey begins, when anxiety and anticipation and thrill are all tangled up together. Here's me when I was around 6 years old. I flew to Sweden that summer with my dad to see my aunts and uncles, my farmor and farfar, my grandparents and cousins. Well, I was so excited the night before that I couldn't sleep at all because I kept trying to imagine what it was going to be like to fly in the plane. So I tried to capture that ecstatic joy of Christmas morning. Just the sparkle and the wonder. Yokomeshi is the fourth postcard, and it's this wonderful Japanese word that describes that truly unique kind of stress that you experience when speaking in a foreign language, or that you can experience. Meshi literally means boiled rice, and yoko means horizontal. So putting them together, it means a meal eaten sideways. But if you listen closely, you'll hear snippets of Frere Jacques. But you'll hear it in a very distorted way, just like when you're in another country trying to figure out what they're saying. Like, are they doing Frere Jacques? And then meanwhile, these guys, the violin and cello, are going to hold this long note and try to hide their bow changes, so it just seems like one continuous. The fifth postcard is a German word.
Fernweh.
And it literally translates to far sickness or distance sickness versus another word which means homesickness. It describes a feeling that's even stronger than wanderlust. While someone with wanderlust might sit at home happily, dreaming about all the places they could visit, someone with this would feel a deeper sense of longing and a sort of homesickness, but for distant lands. It opens with this very forlorn sounding cello part. The sixth postcard
Trouvaille.
is a French word that describes a chance encounter with something wonderful. Whether it's stumbling across a hidden back street, a quaint cafe, or connecting with a local, this French word describes those magical moments we experience in our journeys. There's a sleuth-like, suspenseful type character to the piece because we're going to be exploring.
Like that character in Garrison Keillor that they always did.
Any guesses as to how to pronounce this 7th postcard? This Swedish word? Anyone? Okay, even though my dad was Swedish, this totally calls for a Google opportunity. Here's what I found on the internet.
Livsnjutare. Livsnjutare. Livsnjutare.
Yeah, what he just said. Anyway, this fancy word means someone who loves life fully and lives it to the extreme. Literally, it means enjoyer of life. So I tried to capture that with this really rhythmic, kind of upbeat ostinato pattern in the piano part.
And then a little outburst of joy in the violin and cello. Real rhythmic. Little slides, chords, and mentos that they can do. Doesn't sound like that. Also, there's a displacement of the beat. So, like if it's in 4/4, 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, then you'll feel 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 on top of that sometimes. So, like the left hand 1 2 3 4 1 2, and the right hand 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1. So together, really kind of gives it this jolly, energetic vibrance.
So, have you ever danced the tango? Well, this 8th word, this 8th postcard, significant, kind of reminds me of a tango. Because it doesn't always take two to tango. Because sometimes the kind of travels, the real journeys, where you return home altered on some cellular level, are best done by yourself. So this Latin word, from the Latin word significant means lonely or solitary, and it describes anyone who enjoys meandering around new countries and new places alone in order to take it all in. So more than your daily grind, more than your bricks and mortar home, it's the people in your life who fix your sense of identity, and being away from them for a while is strangely freeing, no matter how much you love them. So it doesn't always necessarily take two to tango. So there's kind of two moods to this piece. The first one would be when you travel alone, sometimes you do feel lonely or reflective.
At the beginning.
the second feeling, it gets a little faster at the end. It's pretty vibrant.
Sometimes when you travel, it's a very vibrant experience. You see more, you smell more, you taste more, you feel more alive. So there's this change, like an awakening in the middle of the piece, and the tempo picks up.
Traveled somewhere and seen something that was so fascinating that you were awed to the point where your jaw dropped. This Latin word, numinous, describes an experience that makes you fearful yet fascinated, awed yet attracted. It's the powerful personal feeling of being overwhelmed and inspired. Like if you have a numinous experience at Yosemite National Park, gazing up at El Capitan or at a towering black bear.
Years ago, when we were in Lauterbrunnen in Switzerland, we were in this chalet that had a balcony and sitting on the porch watching a full moon move from one mountain across in front of us to behind the second mountain to the right. It was just amazing. And that image particularly came to mind for this piece. And I tried to capture the expansiveness and magic.
By having one hand really high and one really low. And then the open chords.
Instead of having closed chords, they're opened up, so it's real expansive.
the cello part, and then the piano joining in.
So the 10th postcard, quaquaversal, is this really cool Latin word that describes things moving or happening in every direction instantaneously. So we've taken the motives and the melodies from all the previous postcards and woven them together to kind of create this chaotic feeling, which, let's face it, we all have experienced when traveling. But it's like that feeling when you think your passport's in your sock drawer, but it's not, and your flight leaves in 3 hours.
Next, they will play my beautiful E minor piano trio. Of course, that was the Czech composer Antonín Dvořák.
So we'll close the concert with a set of pieces based upon poems. There's some of my favorite poems by Robert Frost, Emily Dickinson, and of course the wonderful Eleanor Ann Walker, commissioned poet. But also I wanted to include some scripture because I think some of the most beautiful words ever written are in scripture, and they are the basis of my life. And one of my favorites is Philippians 4. In the 4th verse, it says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say, rejoice. Let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. So in the gospel style, scored for 2 voices and piano trio, we have And Again I Say Rejoice.
have a piece inspired by one of my all-time favorite poems.
Forever is composed of nows, by Emily Dickinson. Forever is composed of nows. 'Tis not a different time, except for infiniteness and latitude of home. From this, experienced here, remove the dates. To these, let months dissolve in further months, and years exhale in years. Without debate or pause, or celebrated days, no different our years would be from Anno Domini's.
So the third poem is pretty hardcore. I gave it a title of The Transforming Face, but it's based on the poem My Life Had Stood a Loaded Gun by Emily Dickinson. And some people interpret this poem can be interpreted so many different ways, but some interpret it as, rage. And that's the interpretation I kind of go with.
And if you've ever known anyone with pure rage, it's quite scary when they're screaming and going wild. But actually, what can be even scarier than the screaming and the wildness is
when they all of a sudden changed and their face right in front of you goes to this totally lucid kind of normal, but it's not exactly normal because they've got this kind of crazy look behind the eye, even though they're all of a sudden, quote, sane. And it's that the Vesuvian face in the poem is in that moment the part I try to capture here, because it's like they love the fact that they have unleashed this rage, and they just adore it more than anything, which to me kind of seems like a possession almost.
which is another interpretation some people have of this poem by Emily Dickinson.
And it actually ends with these four kind of haunting chords, as if it's chiming the hour for the witching hour.
The next piece is The Sound of Trees, inspired by Robert Frost's beautiful poem. I wonder about the trees. Why do we wish to bear forever the noise of these more than another noise, so close to our dwelling place? We suffer them by the day till we lose all measure of pace and fixity in our joys, and acquire a listening air. They are that talks of going, but never gets away, and that talks no less for knowing, as it grows wiser and older, that now it means to stay. My feet tug at the floor, and my head sways to my shoulder sometimes when I watch trees sway from the window or the door. I shall set forth for somewhere. I shall make the reckless choice some day when they are in voice, and tossing so as to scare the white clouds over them on. I shall have less to say, but I shall be gone.
So in this poem, Frost describes trees rustling in the wind and how annoying and distracting this noise is from productivity. And this bitterness and complaining is quite contagious and contaminates everyone around them. So in the beginning, you hear the dialogue between the trees, talking about all the wild things they're going to do when they get out of there. But the ostinato pattern in the piano part, plus the nature of the piece staying in one key, then modulating just ever so slightly away, represents the fact that, they're bound to stay there because of their roots. In the back of my mind, though, was this fabulous TED Talk that I saw about how trees actually talk to each other. And I want to play just some snippets from the video.
Imagine you're walking through a forest. I'm guessing you're thinking of a collection of trees. Yes, trees are the foundation of forests. But a forest is much more than what you see. And today, I want to change the way you think about forests. You see, underground, there is this other world, a world of infinite biological pathways that connect trees and allow them to communicate, and allow the forest to behave as though it's a single organism. It might remind you of a sort of intelligence. And I have to tell you, before me, scientists have thought that this below-ground mutualistic symbiosis called a mycorrhiza was involved. Mycorrhiza literally means fungus root. You see their reproductive organs when you walk through the forest. They're the mushrooms. The mushrooms, though, are just the tip of the iceberg, because coming out of those stems are fungal threads that form a mycelium, and that mycelium infects and colonizes the roots of all the trees and plants. And where the fungal cells interact with the root cells, there's a trade of carbon for nutrients. And that fungus gets those nutrients by growing through the soil and coating every soil particle. The web is so dense that there can be hundreds of kilometers of mycelium under a single footstep. And not only that, that mycelium connects different individuals in the forest. Individuals not only of the same species, but between species, like birch and fir. And it works kind of like the internet. You see, like all networks, mycorrhizal networks have nodes and links. We made this map by examining the short sequences of DNA of every tree and every fungal individual in a patch of Douglas fir forest. In this picture, the circles represent the Douglas fir, or the nodes, and the lines represent the interlinking fungal highways, or the links. The biggest, darkest nodes are the busiest nodes. We call those hub trees, or more fondly, mother trees, because it turns out that those hub trees nurture their young, the ones growing in the understory. And if you can see those yellow dots, those are the young seedlings that have established within the network of the old mother trees. In a single forest, a mother tree can be connected to hundreds of other trees. And using our isotope tracers, we have found that mother trees will send their excess carbon through the mycorrhizal network to the understory seedlings. And we've associated this with increased seedling survival by 4 times. Now, we know we all favor our own children. And I wondered, could Douglas fir recognize its own kin? Like Mama Grizzly and her cub? So we set about an experiment, and we grew mother trees with kin and stranger seedlings. And it turns out they do recognize their kin. Mother trees colonize their kin with bigger mycorrhizal networks. They send them more carbon below ground. They even reduce their own root competition to make elbow room for their kids. When mother trees are injured or dying, they also send messages, wisdom, onto the next generation of seedlings. So we've used isotope tracing to trace carbon moving from an injured mother tree down her trunk into the mycorrhizal network and into her neighboring seedlings. Not only carbon, but also defense signals. And these two compounds have increased the resistance of those seedlings to future stresses. So trees talk.
So the bulk of the piece is focusing on this fabulous metaphor of the trees representing the complainers who always talk a big game. The roots, of course, represent responsibility that hold them back, and the clouds represent those people who quietly and efficiently make changes. What's interesting is that Frost criticizes the trees for their lack of ambition and for settling with a mundane life, and that rather the reckless way of life is far superior to staying in our comfort zone.
But the great thing is toward boldness, courage to go ahead. One of the poets says that the object in life is to be with caution bold. Bold is the first word, and the second word is caution. And the caution means all the laws and qualifications and everything like that, and the knowledge, the information and everything like that for security. The caution is security. Bold is freedom and the breaking thing. The true liberty, the boldness comes in the true liberty. People will tell you the opposite. They'll tell you that the freedom lies in being cautious. Freedom lies in being bold.
So I'll leave the second piece that's inspired by a Robert Frost poem, Mowing, as a surprise for you. But when I went up to Vermont and New Hampshire to see the homes that he had lived in, I was particularly impressed by the scythe that he had used to mow, cut the grass, and his work ethic. So this piece is particularly special to me, and poem as well. So the next poem is The Little Black Dog by Elizabeth Gardner Reynolds, and it goes like this. I wonder if Christ had a little black dog, all curly and woolly like mine, with 2 silk ears and a nose round and wet, and 2 eyes brown and tender that shine. I'm sure if he had, that little black dog knew right from the first he was God, that he needed no proofs that Christ was divine, but just worshipped the ground he trod. I'm afraid that he hadn't, because I have read how he prayed in the garden alone, when all of his friends and disciples had fled, even Peter, that one called a stone. And oh, I am sure that little black dog, with a true heart so tender and warm, would never have left him to suffer alone, but creeping right under his arm, would have licked those dear fingers in agony clasped, and counting all favors but loss. When they led him away, would have trotted behind and followed him quite to the cross. So this one kind of follows along the poem as well, just like the last one. So in the beginning, it's this kind of little mixed meter depiction of the dog trotting along, and then in comes a more worshipful part where he's adoring Christ and they're praying maybe. And then it gets a little darker and the harmonies change. Pizzicatas enter, and we literally kind of enter into the scene of the crucifixion. Not kind of, this is supposed to be a depiction of that, a musical depiction. So I just hope the violinist is willing to do scratch tones, but just really ugly, horrible sounds there. And at the end, we take a little leave from the poem itself, but it's almost as if, the little black dog's left alone and like, okay, what do we do now? A little bit of a state of bewilderment.
So the final piece of the program is actually a fun part of this project. We start with a hike that the composer took of the Ricketts Glen waterfall trail with 24 waterfalls and all sorts of treacherous stone steps. Of course, she had her Chow Chow dog, who's not very good on leash, and an old pug with her for the hike. So it was truly an outward bound experience for her, but absolutely glorious. And as she composed this piece, which is a little bit Austin Powers tongue-in-cheek, to capture that element of the Chow Chow and pug and the ludicrous nature of that. Then the commissioned poet is going to be writing a poem, the fabulous poet, by the way, Eleanor Ann Walker, about this beautiful place of nature, not contaminated with a Chow Chow and pug. And the composer then will probably revisit, based upon this beautiful poem, the composition, and maybe even have a second composition. But we're going to meet in the middle, and it should be a very, very interesting part of this project.
It's pretty groovy, man, and we're even going to have a conga player for this one, so I think it'll be a lot of fun. So thanks for listening to this, and I hope maybe I brought you on some fun travels and you heard some cool sounds you like. And we really would appreciate any contribution you can make so that we can bring this show to life. If you let us know your contact info, we can also let you know when the performance date is. But we really appreciate this, and thanks for traveling along.